Hi everyone. So today I want to talk about something that kind of bothers me. It's a term called no work gardening. And I'm starting to see this pop up a bit more, but this terminology has been around for years. But I'll let you know why it irks me today with some of the videos and comments I'm seeing on YouTube and some of the gardening information that's out there because it's not quite accurate. So the no work garden idea came from the early 1970s by a woman named Ruth Stout. Now, Ruth was a real pioneer in gardening and in her methods of gardening. She believed, and she was called, the Queen of Mulch, as in mulch, mulch, mulch. So that is the methodology she used in her garden. She didn't use compost bins. She didn't believe in compost bins. There was no need for it. She didn't believe in tilling the soil because there was no need to overturn the soil. And she didn't believe in weeding. She wanted to spend her time planting her vegetables and harvesting her vegetables and mulching. Those were the key. And she considered that a no work garden. Now, when she did mulching, her belief was to use anything you had on hand for mulching. For instance, you would use grass clippings, you would use leaves, you would use straw, you would use any of the leftover remains from your plants or from your kitchen, such as leftover vegetables. You could use your coffee, eggshells, all those kind of things went into the garden and went directly onto the garden, not into a compost pile. And she would pile that up. She would lift up the mulch to plant her garden, put her seeds in because they believed in doing seeds back then, not so much bought-in plants like what we see a lot of gardeners doing today, and plant those out and then cover with mulch. They did not believe in watering, so they didn't have their wells or their drip lines or their city water to water the gardens. They let Mother Nature water that garden, and if weeds did sprout in that soil, then they would just put more mulch on. That was her practice to keep her work down. So that is why she called it a no work garden, because she kept the work in the garden down to a minimum through using these practices. And she was rewarded with beautiful soil by mulching with all these natural, organic products that come from Mother Nature. And that resulted in a lot of the worm castings in the soil, the beneficial insects that help to improve that soil and keep the plants healthy. And if Ruth seen a weed, she was right on top of those weeds. She would throw some more mulch on it. She always had mulch ready to go to put on that garden. So that was why she called it a no work garden. And she wrote a number of different books on how to garden and the methods that she used. Nowadays, we see a lot of people that are doing homesteads and they're trying to use these techniques in their garden. And that's great. I mean, when it comes to farming, and I call that farming, I mean, I grew up with a family that farmed. You used what you had available to you and you let Mother Nature water that garden. And sometimes they tilled, sometimes they didn't, but definitely was never no work because if you weren't looking at doing mulching or using straw or manure from your animals to build up that soil, you were planting and harvesting. So it was never officially no work. So the word no work to me means that you're not expanding any energy to do anything in that garden. And that's just not the case. It's one thing to pick up a shovel, but the minute you put that shovel into the soil, you're expanding energy. So I kind of dispute the whole no work thing, but for this video, that doesn't really matter how I feel about it. This is just some of the methods that are out there to reduce your work in the garden, providing that you live in that kind of climate that you can do that, which means that you live on a farm, an acreage, or an area where you can do this and where you don't have to spend a lot of time maintaining your garden. Now, if you live in an urban area, for instance, and a lot of us live in urban areas and live in cities, towns, etc., like that, and you have a lawn, even a fake lawn, and you have flower beds and that, a lot of us use compost and we'll use cedar mulch and that for the beds, but it's never no work. There's always some sort of maintenance you're going to have to do. So I have issues with the whole no work thing. And I'll get to why I'm irked about this, because this stuff doesn't irk me, but there was some videos that are not exactly being honest in the information that they're providing. And it worries me for new gardeners thinking that you can just go out, stick some plants in the ground and they're going to grow. Because that's, you know, they may grow, but they may not grow well and they may not survive, especially when you're talking perennials. And this particular video was talking about perennials. But anyhow, what I'm trying to say is there's no such thing as a no work garden, because if you're doing any of these tasks, such as planting and harvesting and mulching, you're expanding energy, and that results in work. Now, you can call it what you want. You may not say, hey, Jack, I would call it no work because I'm enjoying doing it. Fair enough. I totally am good with that. However, there are a lot of YouTubers doing videos now saying they're using the no work method. And I'm even seeing Canadian YouTubers that are doing this, and they have raised beds and they have drip lines in those beds. And they're using landscape fabrics and some of these things. So be careful what you watch and what you believe, because that's not a no work method when you're using drip lines to water your plants and you're putting landscape fabric and everything down. You're still expanding energy, and that is not the Ruth Stout method, okay? And that is not a lot of the homesteading methods that are out there by some of the bigger homestead channels or just family and friends that farm. They do not use a lot of drip lines. I mean, nowadays we're starting to see more technology involved, but in the older days, they didn't use drip lines to water. And a lot of times they didn't even have hoses to put out there. But the video I am referring to was the video done by a really large YouTube channel that focused on cleaning and organization. And they decided to go down the road and do a no work flower garden. And what they said is that you could go into your garden, and it was in a city or an urban lot, and you could go in and you could plant coneflowers, black-eyed Susans, coreopsis, and lavender in your garden, not stating what zones those plants grow in, not stating what kind of growing conditions the plants need, and not stating anything about watering the plants, nor were they mentioned anything about, other than the fact that they're perennial, what their needs were, as in, cutting them back in the spring or fall. Did not mention anything about fertilizing. Did not mention that, like lavender, for instance, for me in my zone, will not come back year after year because I'm too cold. None of that was mentioned. It's just that you go and you put these plants in that are, and they didn't even mention drought tolerant, I might add. I'm saying drought tolerant. And you put them in the ground and you throw some mulch down, you leave them. And they're going to bloom and be beautiful for you year after year after year. So do your research. This is my recommendations to new gardeners. Anybody who's been around in the gardening community and that gardens and watches YouTube videos and that, you pretty much know when somebody's full of crap and when they aren't. And quite honestly, there's so many things to consider for gardening, and a no-work flower garden is not that. If I was going to try to describe what a no-work flower garden was, the first thing I would say to a new gardener or to any gardener is that you need to know your climate and what grows in your climate, first of all. You need to determine what you want to grow. You want to grow vegetables, you want to grow flowers. Where do you want to grow them? Where does the sun hit that garden? How much sun, how much shade is in that garden? And I mean, that's not a lot of work to determine that. And then you have to decide from a personal preference how much time you want to spend in that garden. So for instance, if you want to go and you live in a zone like me in zone 4, and you want to plant drought tolerant plants, then you're going to want to give them, in particular, coneflowers, coreopsis, and black-eyed Susans. You're going to want to give them full sun. You're going to want to mulch around them big time if you don't want to water. You're going to want to cut them back in the fall or spring to get more blooms. And you're going to want to constantly mulch throughout the summer to try to keep them going, because even though they're drought resistant, they still need some moisture. And so, for instance, in my climate, it's really hit and miss on the moisture. Some years we get a lot of moisture, some years we get very little moisture, and then we have really cold winters. So that's the other thing you need to take into consideration is the seasons of your garden. For me, anything I plant needs to be able to handle a -40 winter and dry, cold weather. And then some years it needs to be able to handle a rainy, cold, lukewarm winter. Like, it really varies. So you need to know your climate. So when you watch these videos and someone says, hey, you can just go throw these plants in the ground and they're going to grow for you, throw a little mulch around them and that's good enough, and don't do anything else, don't water, just enjoy them, take that with a grain of salt, because there's always something else you need to consider when you garden. So I hope I wasn't too preachy to you guys, and I really wanted to get that off my chest because there's so much misinformation out there that are putting out information just for the sake of putting out content. And on the other hand, there is a lot of really good content on YouTube as well, and demonstrations on how to plant stuff too. So there's a bit of both. But anyhow, take some stuff with a grain of salt, do your own research, and basically plan for how much time you want to spend in that garden and how much work you want to do, and take advantage of some of the methods that are out there to make the amount of maintenance that is required for that garden less, and only plant what you enjoy. Thanks everyone, and I'll be looking to hear the comments. What is your belief on a no-work garden or a no-work flower garden? Does it even exist in today's day and age when you live in an urban center, or if you live on a farm? Do you employ those practices? Let me know in the comments. This isn't meant to be a controversial video. This is meant to be a video to encourage you to do your research and not take everything you hear as gospel. Thanks everyone. Bye.